What if the real reason they don't love you is because they never truly saw you? Not the version you polished, not the smile you wear when you're hurting, not the kindness you give without expecting anything back, but you, the real you, the soul underneath the skin, the man who stays up late thinking, overgiving, doubting whether being good is ever enough. Nathan had asked himself that question too many times, and one morning in the chilled mist of Central Park, it finally shattered him. He sat alone on a bench near Bow Bridge, the city waking up around him. Horns, runners, birds, life moving on as if his heart wasn't caving in. He had just ended things with Emily, a woman who never raised her voice, never cheated, never left, but also never really chose him. She loved his effort, not his essence, and that was a quieter betrayal than any scream could deliver. He had done everything right. Showed up, listened, bought the flowers, stayed through the storms. Yet somehow she looked past him like a painting in a hallway, there, but never really noticed. That morning, Nathan realized something so uncomfortable, so raw, it left him shaking. You can't convince someone to see you when they've already decided not to look. And maybe, just maybe, the real tragedy isn't being rejected. It's being invisible to someone you'd give everything for. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply stood up, walked home, and opened a blank journal. At the top of the page, he wrote, one sentence, "What if I stop chasing approval and start seeing myself?" For the first time in years, Nathan began listing things that made him proud, not to impress anyone else, but to remind himself who he really was. Not his job, not his clothes, not the way Emily used to laugh when he said the right things. He wrote down memories, small ones, moments no one saw, helping a lost kid find his mom, picking up trash at the park without thinking, saying no when it terrified him. It hit him hard. These quiet things, they were him, and they were enough. You don't have to beg someone to love you. You don't have to audition to be worthy. You were never invisible. You just kept handing mirrors to people too blind to reflect your worth back to you. This is where Nathan's story begins, not with the chase, not with heartbreak, but with the most powerful shift a man can make, claiming his own value without waiting for anyone else to approve. And if you've ever felt unseen, even when you gave your best, this story is for you. Because what comes next will change the way you love, speak, walk, and live. Before we go any further, if this hits something deep inside you, take a second to subscribe to the channel. It gives us fuel to keep telling the stories no one else dares to tell, and it helps this message reach others who need it most. Quick question, before we dive deeper. If someone fails to see your worth, what should you do? A. Try harder until they finally recognize it. B. Step back and start recognizing it in yourself first. Comment below with A or B. I want to hear your thoughts. When Nathan boarded the plane to Kyoto, he wasn't running from anything. He was walking towards something, though he didn't yet know what. After years of being overlooked, undervalued, and emotionally depleted, he no longer needed answers from other people. He needed a reset from within. The silent retreat in Kyoto wasn't glamorous. No phones, no talking, no mirrors. Just you, your breath, and time. On the first morning, a monk whispered something that clung to Nathan's chest. The way you walk is the way you carry your soul. He thought about that as he moved through the temple grounds, barefoot on cold stone, surrounded by fog and stillness. No one was watching him. No one was judging him. But for the first time in a long time, he began watching himself, not critically, but curiously. Was he walking like a man who knew his own worth? Was his posture showing pride or permission? Was he present or merely passing through? Over the course of 10 days, something subtle began to shift. He learned to eat slowly, to breathe before reacting, to bow with intention instead of habit. Even the act of pouring tea became sacred. There was no audience, no validation, only self-awareness. And in that solitude, Nathan realized how deeply disconnected he had been, not just from others, but from himself. He remembered the times back in New York when he slouched in rooms he didn't feel worthy to be in, when he laughed too quickly at jokes that made him uncomfortable, when he said yes out of fear and sorry out of habit. All those tiny betrayals of posture and presence were echoes of a deeper belief that he didn't matter unless someone else confirmed it. But in Kyoto, something radical took root. Nathan began to carry himself like someone who belonged, not because of status or looks or approval, but because he was. Because being alive, honest, and whole was enough. When he returned home, people noticed without knowing why. A barista in Brooklyn paused mid-latte and said, "You seem grounded." A stranger on the subway asked if he was a teacher or a writer, and Emily, yes, that Emily, sent him a message that read, "You seem different, happier, stronger." Nathan never replied, because by then he understood something most people never do. When you carry yourself like you matter, the world doesn't give you permission, it gives you space. Respect isn't demanded, it's mirrored. Confidence doesn't roar, it resonates. The man who once bent to be seen had become a man who stood still and was felt. And that, Nathan realized, is the essence of quiet power. Not in saying you're enough, but in moving through the world like you already know. It was a rainy evening in Seattle when Nathan sat at the far end of the dinner table, surrounded by the laughter of people who used to know him. It was a reunion of old friends, faces from high school, college, and early jobs, people who remembered a version of him that no longer existed. They drank, they joked, they reminisced. And then Colin arrived. Colin hadn't changed. He was still the loudest voice in the room, still performing for attention, still mocking others just enough to be funny, but sharp enough to cut. He had been Nathan's friend once, the kind who thrived when others stayed quiet. And tonight, like clockwork, Colin started poking. "So Nathan," he smirked across the table, "still chasing your little dream job, or have you joined the real world yet?" The old Nathan would have laughed it off, maybe made a joke back, maybe defended himself, explained his choices, tried to prove that he was doing something meaningful. But not tonight. Nathan looked up, locked eyes with Colin, and said nothing. Not a smirk, not a retort, just silence. Calm, still, unshaken. The moment stretched. The room felt it. Someone cleared their throat. Another changed the subject. But Colin, the man who always got the last word, had nothing left to say. Later that night, as the group dispersed, one of the women, Janelle, a classmate from years ago, walked up to Nathan. "You didn't say much tonight," she said, "but somehow, I heard you louder than anyone else." Nathan smiled. He had learned something most people never do. Silence isn't weakness, it's restraint, it's presence, it's power wrapped in control. Back in New York, Nathan had started experimenting with it. Moments of choosing not to reply, not to explain, not to rush into the noise of every conversation. He had begun practicing what he called intentional silence, in meetings, in conflicts, in relationships. Not to be cold, but to be clear, to make space, to let people reveal themselves without interruption. What he found surprised him. When he stopped defending himself, people showed their true colors quicker. When he stopped filling every silence, others filled it with honesty or discomfort. And when he stopped over-explaining, he started understanding who was really listening. Silence doesn't beg to be understood. It observes who's willing to understand. Nathan didn't become passive. He became precise. Every word he did choose to speak carried more weight, more intent, more truth. Because silence had taught him how to listen, first to the room, then to himself. In a world that rushes to reply, to post, to defend, Nathan had found something rare. The discipline to be still, the courage to say nothing, and the clarity to know when that says everything. And for the first time, he didn't need to be heard to feel seen. The evening air in Venice was heavy with warmth and the soft scent of salt water drifting off the canals. Candlelight flickered along the edge of a rooftop terrace where a small group had gathered to celebrate Nathan and Sophia's engagement. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and for anyone watching from a distance, it would have looked like love. But Nathan was watching her, not the way she moved, but the way she dismissed him. For the fourth time that night, Sophia had cut him off, mid-sentence to correct him. She smiled while doing it, as if that softened the edge. Her tone was polished, charming even, but underneath, there was a quiet erosion happening, and Nathan felt it. Every time he had to choose between honesty and peace, every time his thoughts were edited to keep harmony. She raised a glass and toasted herself, the career she'd built, the life she was planning, and the man she called her steady rock. The room clapped. Nathan smiled on cue, but inside, something fractured. That night, as the city settled into silence and the canals returned to stillness, Nathan stood alone on the Ponte dell'Accademia, staring out at the dark water beneath. The lanterns from passing gondolas left, trails of light, shimmering and fading like the promises he once believed in. And there it was, a truth so clear, so painful, he almost whispered it out loud. This isn't love. This is performance. And I've been playing a role I never auditioned for. He walked back to the hotel, packed a single bag, and left a note behind. Not angry, not bitter, just done. By morning, he was in Madrid. No plan, no noise, just space. He wandered through Retiro Park, sat alone in front of Goya's dark, unsettling paintings at the Prado Museum, and let the silence stretch. At first, it hurt. He questioned everything. Was he weak? Did he give up too soon? Would anyone ever stay? But slowly, beneath the ache, he began to feel something he hadn't in years: clarity. Walking away didn't feel like losing. It felt like returning, not to someone, but to himself. He stopped trying to be small to make others feel big. He stopped folding himself into shapes for relationships that couldn't hold his truth. And in that release, he found power. Not loud, not sharp, not vindictive, just still. A quiet strength that came from knowing he'd rather be alone with his integrity than together with his silence suffocated. People would later ask why he ended the engagement, why he walked away from what looked so perfect. He never gave them an explanation. Because some choices don't need defending. They just need to be made. And that's what walking away really is. Not a retreat, but a return. Not abandonment, but alignment. It's saying, I don't need to stay in what diminishes me just because I once said yes. I have the right to choose again. I have the right to choose me. The apartment in Brooklyn was small, second floor, with creaky floors and a view of the deli across the street. Nathan had moved in with Marcus after returning from Madrid, two friends sharing space in the city that never slowed down. At first, it felt like home. Late-night takeout, laughter from old college memories, a sense of familiarity that made the silence in his chest easier to carry. But living with someone, especially someone who once knew you as a boy, has a way of testing who you've become as a man. It started with the little things: loud music after midnight, dirty dishes multiplying in the sink, interrupted moments of solitude. Nathan felt his balance shift again, not as dramatically as before, but enough to feel the weight of his own silence. Not the still kind he had learned to love, but the kind that holds back truth. One morning, after a restless night of noise and racing thoughts, he sat at the kitchen table before Marcus woke up. A pen, a page, and no anger, just clarity. He wrote, "Hey Marcus, I know we both needed this space and I'm grateful to share it with you. I've realized I function best with some quiet structure. I'm going to start keeping things silent. After 10 p.m., set cleanup as a shared task and reserve Sundays for solitude. I'm not upset, just honoring what I need to stay grounded." He folded the note and left it on the counter. No lecture, no drama, no passive-aggressive sarcasm, just the truth, clear, calm, and unshakable. Marcus didn't respond right away, but he adjusted, slowly. The apartment grew quieter, more respectful. When boundaries weren't shouted, they were easier to hear. Nathan began applying the same principle elsewhere. at work, in friendships, even with his family. He no longer raised his voice to assert himself. He raised his standards. He understood now that boundaries weren't barriers to connection. They were the framework that allowed connection to feel safe. Without them, love becomes obligation. Presence becomes pressure, and self-respect slowly erodes under the weight of unmet needs. He learned that when you yell to be respected, you're already giving up your power. But when you state your truth without emotion, people feel its weight more deeply. Because it's not about control, it's about clarity, and clarity doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs the courage to be still in your truth. One evening, Marcus looked at him and said, "Man, you've changed. You're quieter now, but somehow louder than ever." Nathan smiled. Because that was the point. The strongest lines you draw are often the ones you don't have to explain. The ones that speak not with volume, but with conviction. Lines drawn with grace, not aggression. And in learning to draw those lines, Nathan discovered something few ever master: the power to protect your peace without ever raising your voice. Austin was different from New York. Slower, warmer, more forgiving. Nathan had taken a new role as a creative strategist at a boutique agency, hoping the change of pace would match the person he had become. It was his chance to rebuild, this time with intention. But the moment he met Danielle, his new boss, something didn't sit right. She was magnetic, polished, articulate, endlessly enthusiastic. In the interview, she promised mentorship, creative freedom, and fast-track growth. She even used words like family and vision. Nathan wanted to believe her. He needed to. After everything he'd been through, the idea of someone seeing his talent and valuing it felt like a balm. But words are easy. By the second month, the cracks began to show. She rescheduled one-on-ones over and over. Feedback was vague, compliments were hollow, and the big project she once said he'd lead, given to someone else. When he brought it up, she smiled and said, "Oh, I meant long-term leadership. You're still on the right path." Nathan had heard that kind of language before. Empty scaffolding, pretty promises, no substance underneath. So, he started paying attention. Not to what she said, but to what she did. And not with resentment, but with precision. He kept notes, short ones, bullet points in a folder titled "Reality." Not to use against her, but to keep himself sane. He wrote down every commitment made and every time it was ignored. Every compliment that didn't match behavior. Every delay that felt like dismissal. The list grew. And with it, his clarity. This wasn't just about Danielle. It was a mirror to so many other places in his life. Moments where he let words hypnotize him. In dating, in friendships, even in how he used to talk to himself. "I'm fine. I'll change. Next time will be different." But change is never spoken. It's revealed. Truth isn't in the promise. It's in the pattern. Nathan stopped, overanalyzing people's intentions. He watched their habits, how they showed up, how they followed through, or didn't. And something shifted. His standards got quieter, but firmer. He didn't confront Danielle. He just started declining meetings that led nowhere. He stopped volunteering extra hours. He focused his energy on what he could control, his own consistency, his own work, his own direction. Eventually, he left the job. No dramatic exit, no final speech. Just a quiet decision to walk toward environments that didn't need to be convinced to value him. And with that clarity, something else happened. He started watching his own actions with the same lens. Did his words match his walk? Did his values show up in his choices? It was humbling, but necessary. Because in a world drowning in noise, Nathan had learned one thing with absolute certainty. Truth isn't told, it's shown. And from now on, that's what he would trust. It was a cool October afternoon in Chicago when Nathan first met Rachel. He was in town for a short workshop on storytelling and digital media, not looking for anything beyond quiet connection and good coffee. She walked into the bookstore where he was reading, all denim and laughter, asking if the seat across from him was taken. There was something magnetic about her, casual but intense. Words flowed between them like they'd known each other in another life. By the third hour, she had shared stories of childhood dreams, heartbreaks, and hopes too big for one life. She was charming, spontaneous, vulnerable in a way that felt rare. By the third day, she called him someone I trust more than most. By the third week, she hinted at moving closer, talking about how aligned their souls felt. It all sounded beautiful. But it moved too fast. Not in time, but in comfort. Something about it made Nathan feel like he was on a stage again, performing in a role she had written in her head. And this time, he paid attention. When she didn't text, back for 2 days after saying she couldn't imagine a day without hearing from him, Nathan didn't panic. He waited. When she returned with a flood of apologies and poetic justifications, he smiled, but quietly started a new page in his journal, Red Flag Diary. He didn't do it to criticize her. He did it to stay awake. Because for most of his life, he had fallen for words. Now he wanted to fall into truth. So he tracked her patterns, not to judge, but to see. When did her words match her actions? When did they drift? When was intimacy genuine, and when was it strategy? He saw the difference. She would say all the right things, but her presence felt selective. Her attention was inconsistent. Her stories sometimes changed just slightly, enough to raise quiet questions in his gut. He didn't accuse, he didn't overthink, he just watched. And slowly, with grace, he stepped back. Not because she was cruel, but because he was finally listening to his own inner voice louder than the allure of hers. Nathan still cared. But he had learned the most powerful act of love isn't losing yourself in someone, it's staying yourself beside them. And when you can't do that, it's not love, it's illusion. He didn't close his heart. He sharpened his eyes. He realized love isn't just about who makes your pulse race, it's about who shows up when the room isn't lit, who keeps their word when no one is watching, who sees you, not just for what you give, but for who you are when you stop giving. Staying open while staying wise, that's a harder love, a better one. And this time, Nathan was ready for it. The dining room was filled with the usual rhythm of a Brooklyn family dinner. Too many conversations at once, clinking silverware, and the familiar weight of expectations sitting at the table uninvited. Nathan hadn't been home in months, and his return had stirred something in his father. That old itch to steer him back into the version of life he had always wanted for his son. Between bites of roast chicken and polite smiles, the question came. Not cruelly, but predictably. When are you going to stop chasing these abstract ideas and settle down with a real job, Nathan? It wasn't new. Nathan had heard versions of that question for years, sometimes cloaked in concern, other times wrapped in sarcasm. And for a long time it worked. It made him doubt, shrink, recalibrate who he was to make others more comfortable. But not tonight. He set his fork down slowly, looked across the table, and replied without raising his voice. Dad, I know you mean well, but this path I'm on, it's not confusion, it's clarity. I'm not asking you to approve of it. I'm just asking you to let me live it. The room quieted, not in discomfort, but in realization. Something had shifted. Nathan's tone held no resentment, no need for validation, just certainty. For years, saying no had been the hardest thing for him, not because he lacked boundaries, but because he feared what no might cost him. Connection, approval, love. But slowly, experience had taught him something vital. The price of saying yes when your soul says no is far greater than temporary discomfort. Saying no wasn't defiance, it was alignment. He remembered all the times he said yes when he didn't want to, yes to relationships that drained him, to jobs that boxed him in, to plans that weren't his. Every one of those yeses chipped away at his self-respect like quiet erosion. And now finally he was building that ground back brick by brick, with no to guilt, no to explaining every choice, no to bending for comfort at the cost of his own. That evening after dinner, his cousin pulled him aside. I've never seen you speak like that. How did you do it? Nathan smiled. I stopped seeing no as a rejection of others and started seeing it as a commitment to myself. He understood now that saying no didn't make him difficult. It made him clear. And clarity is kindness, not just to others, but to yourself. The right people would never be pushed away by his no. They would understand it. They would trust it. They would respect it, because when a man learns to say no without apology, he finally learns to say yes with integrity. The auditorium lights in Manhattan dimmed to a soft gold as Nathan stood backstage, fingertips pressed together, breath steady. He was minutes away from stepping onto the TEDx stage to deliver a talk titled "Stillness in the Storm." Years ago, he would have rehearsed his opening 100 times, overthought every word, obsessed over how to be compelling. But now, he just wanted to be true. He stepped into the light not to prove, but to share. Not to perform, but to stand. Open, grounded, unapologetic. The applause was kind, but it wasn't fuel. What mattered was the presence he carried. The room felt it. After the talk, as the crowd filtered out, a woman approached him. She was quiet, composed, and curious in a way that didn't feel intrusive. Her name was Claire. She didn't compliment his delivery. She didn't try to flatter him. She simply said, "You didn't try to convince anyone. You just stood there." That kind of certainty, you don't see it often. Nathan smiled, not because he was flattered, but because he recognized something. That comment had nothing to do with charm. It was recognition. They talked for an hour in the lobby, then walked through the cool streets toward a late-night jazz bar tucked in a quiet corner of the city. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't tension. It was ease. He didn't feel the pressure to be witty, to impress, to read between lines. There was no chase. No chase at all. And that was when it struck him. All the years he had run after affection, trying to earn it, twist himself into someone lovable, perform in the hopes someone might finally stay. All of it had come from a belief that his worth lived in someone else's hands. But now, something had shifted. He wasn't trying to be chosen anymore. He was simply being. And that presence, unbothered, calm, sincere, had become its own magnet. It didn't draw everyone in, but it drew in the right ones. The ones who didn't need a chase to see him. The ones who didn't flinch at depth. The ones who met him at the same level he met himself. Nathan had become someone who didn't pursue connection out of scarcity, but invited it through alignment. And when it didn't come, he didn't shrink. He didn't beg. He just stood still and waited, because the right people don't need to be chased. They recognize you when you arrive. That night, as he walked home alone beneath the amber city lights, he didn't wonder if Claire would text him the next day. He didn't replay the conversation. He just breathed, because for the first time in his life, he no longer needed to chase anything. And in that stillness, everything real finally had room to arrive. Ket by Nathan's story isn't about heartbreak or solitude or even transformation. It's about something deeper, something quieter. It's the journey of a man who finally stopped outsourcing his worth, who stopped asking the world, "Do I matter yet?" and instead answered that question himself. He began like many of us do, kind, loyal, sincere, willing to give more than he received. And in that giving, he believed love would naturally return. But it didn't. Not from Emily, not from Sophia, not from colleagues or friends who only valued the parts of him that made their lives easier. The silence he felt wasn't peace, it was erasure. But the turning point wasn't loud. It came in subtle shifts. A bench in Central Park, a journal page, a silent walk through Kyoto, a decision made on a bridge in Venice. It came in the realization that the world doesn't reward overgiving. It respects boundaries. That love isn't real if it requires you to shrink. That power doesn't scream. It stands still. Throughout Nathan's journey, he learned how to move through the world without chasing applause. He learned to walk away from anything that demanded he betray himself to be accepted. He drew lines without raising his voice. He stopped trusting words and started watching actions. He kept his heart open, but sharpened his eyes. He said no without guilt. And finally, he let go of the chase, only to find that what's meant for you never asks you to run after it. The lesson isn't just for him, it's for all of us. In a world that begs us to prove, to post, to perform, it's revolutionary to be grounded, to be still, to be enough without needing to be seen. You don't attract what you beg for, you attract what you embody. And when you walk with self-respect, when you treat your time, your energy, your heart as sacred, the world shifts around you. The wrong people fall away, the right ones lean in. And most importantly, you feel whole, even when you're alone. So, here's the truth. You don't need to change to be loved. You need to return to who you were before the world told you to edit yourself. That version of you, the quiet, steady, grounded you, that's where your worth lives. Apply this to your life today. Pause, reflect, ask yourself where you've been over-explaining, over-giving, over-chasing. Then take one small action, say no. Walk away, be still, let the silence do the work. Now, a quick reflection for you. If someone only values you when you're constantly proving yourself, what does that really say? A, that you're not trying hard enough. B, that they were never really seeing you in the first place. Comment below with A or B and tell us why. Your answer might resonate with someone who needs to read it. What's your biggest takeaway from Nathan's journey? Where do you see a part of yourself in his story? Drop your thoughts in the comments so we can learn from each other. And if this story stirred something in you, subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support our mission to bring quiet, powerful truths to light. We've got more to come. Stay grounded, stay true, and remember, you were worthy all along. Nathan's story isn't about heartbreak or solitude or even transformation. It's about something deeper, something quieter. It's the journey of a man who finally stopped outsourcing his worth, who stopped asking the world, "Do I matter?" yet, and instead answered that question himself. He began like many of us do, kind, loyal, sincere, willing to give more than he received. And in that giving, he believed love would naturally return, but it didn't. Not from Emily, not from Sophia, not from colleagues or friends who only valued the parts of him that made their lives easier. The silence he felt wasn't peace, it was erasure. But the turning point wasn't loud. It came in subtle shifts. A bench in Central Park, a journal page, a silent walk through Kyoto, a decision made on a bridge in Venice. It came in the realization that the world doesn't reward overgiving, it respects boundaries. That love isn't real if it requires you to shrink. That power doesn't scream, it stands still. Throughout Nathan's journey, he learned how to move through the world without chasing applause. He learned to walk away from anything that demanded he betray himself to be accepted. He drew lines without raising his voice. He stopped trusting words and started watching actions. He kept his heart open but sharpened his eyes. He said no without guilt. And finally, he let go of the chase, only to find that what's meant for you never asks you to run after it. The lesson isn't just for him, it's for all of us. In a world that begs us to prove, to post, to perform, it's revolutionary to be grounded, to be still, to be enough without needing to be seen. You don't attract what you beg for, you attract what you embody. And when you walk with self-respect, when you treat your time, your energy, your heart as sacred, the world shifts around you. The wrong people fall away, the right ones lean in, and most importantly, you feel whole, even when you're alone. So, here's the truth. You don't need to change to be loved. You need to return to who you were before the world told you to edit yourself. That version of you, the quiet, steady, grounded you, that's where your worth lives. Apply this to your life today. Pause, reflect. Ask yourself where you've been over-explaining, over-giving, over-chasing. Then take one small action. Say no. Walk away. Be still. Let the silence do the work. Now, a quick reflection for you. If someone only values you when you're constantly proving yourself, what does that really say? A, that you're not trying hard enough. B, that they were never really seeing you in the first place. Comment below with A or B and and tell us why. Your answer might resonate with someone who needs to read it. What's your biggest takeaway from Nathan's journey? Where do you see a part of yourself in his story? Drop your thoughts in the comments so we can learn from each other. And if this story stirred something in you, subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support our mission to bring quiet, powerful truths to light. We've got more to come. Stay grounded, stay true, and remember, you were worthy all along.